Hey friends, it's Jennifer All here joining you for your daily hope from a backyard in Virginia. I'm out here visiting some family and it's good to be with you. So today we are looking at Lamentations chapter 4, and much like the rest of the book, it truly is a lament. It is God's people crying out in their suffering, in their pain, describing their situation, which is just horrific. And as you read it, it might stir in you some compassion. Bubbles up when you hear about somebody else's pain that they're experiencing, which is a really good thing. However, as you keep reading, you might come across the part where it says, they brought this on themselves. And that's the thing I was focusing on as I was reading this chapter, is how we experience compassion. I was thinking about, when someone is innocent, when something has happened to someone else that seems unfair and unjust, we are so quick to be compassionate towards them. We are so quick to come alongside them and be generous and want to help. But as soon as we learn that maybe they had some sort of contribution to their plight that they're in, that they are bearing the consequences of some of their choices, and that's why they're suffering, man, our compassion becomes conditional way too often. We limit our compassion because we mix in some judgment in there. And I was reflecting on that because it is so different from the way our God works. Because our God's compassion is not conditional. His compassion is not limited by our contribution to our suffering. So you might find yourself in a situation right now. Maybe you feel like this has just happened to you unfairly, and there are many situations like that. And it might be easier for you to understand how God might be with you in your suffering. But sometimes we go through things in life that we feel like we contributed to the reason why we're suffering. Or you see loved ones going through something and you feel your own self limiting your compassion for them because you think, well, they kind of brought this on. Those are the moments where I think it's helpful to remember this truth, that God is still with us in the midst of our suffering, even when we are not innocent to it. Even when we are facing the consequences of things that we have brought on ourselves, God still meets us in the suffering. We can still lament to him and cry out to him because that's who he is. The very word compassion means to suffer with. And that's who our God is. That's what he models for us, is that he enters into our suffering. He doesn't abandon or forsaken us when we are in pain. He's not unaware of who we are. He knows that we are guilty quite often, and that often what we are suffering is because of things that we have chosen or done or been a part of. And yet, while we are still sinners, he died for us. While we are still sinners, he entered in and gave us a pathway home to him, to reconcile to him, to find forgiveness, to find hope, to find freedom. Romans 5 verse 8 tells us that. That's who our God is. He enters into our suffering with us. And I love that reminder because I think often we think when we're suffering, we imagine God is far off. And maybe he's looking at us from a distance, just judging us, waiting for us to figure it out and prove ourselves again. Or other times we think of him as, yes, he's coming alongside and helping us, but he's kind of rolling his eyes and sighing at the same time because we feel like a burden to him. None of that is the case with him. In Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22, it says that his compassions never fail. His mercies are new every morning. This is who our God is. He enters in with us. I'm raising my daughter, she's 3 going on 4. You see her around campus with me sometimes. She's in that stage of life where she's learning right from wrong. She's learning that there are consequences to her actions. And on one tough day, she was having to face the consequences of some of her choices, and she was having to sit in timeout. Sit against the wall until the timer goes off. And man, she was just crying and just heartbroken. And as I watched her, my heart broke for her. I wanted to be able to take away her pain. I wanted to be able to just remove the consequences of her actions. And yet that would not be helpful for her in the long run. I couldn't remove the consequence, but I could help her face it. So I sat down next to her, held her hand, and waited with her until the timer went off. That's what I see God doing with me all the time. He doesn't always remove the consequence of what I'm facing, of the consequence of my actions, but He will enter into it with me. He never makes me go it alone. He comes alongside me, and I see Him doing that for each one of us all the time. Every single one of us, for you, for me. That's His nature.